In this video, we are going to talk about disaster films and their genre. To talk about the disaster genre, we must first understand genre and where we find it. Genre in most of the things we watch, read and listen to. Different genres in other media are music. This could be pop, rap. Books are similar to films. They include genres such as thriller and fantasy. Even dance has genres as well. One example that we could use is the fantasy genre. This could include films such as Lord of the Rings, Narnia and Avatar. What do these films have in common? What are their conventions? Well, they all have a determined hero, a quest, an imagined timeline, and a positive outcome. Now there are three types of disasters that you generally get. Natural. These are your animal and insect related disasters. Examples could be arachnophobia and the birds. The second is elemental disasters. These usually involve disasters such as earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, twisters, and climate change, even asteroids. Films included in this are The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, and The Earthquake. Then there is alien. This can include all things unnatural, so anything from Godzilla to an alien invasion to a zombie apocalypse. Examples include Independence Day, 28 Days Later, and The Day the Earth Stood Still. As we said earlier, generic conventions are rules that all films within each genre follow.
Hollywood science, they make up a scientific reason for everything that happens. Most of the time, we just ignore it.
The protagonist is left struggling to live or actually dies.
There is always a family involved. One I can think of is The Impossible.
Destruction of iconic buildings. These are some of the best scenes in the film. When an alien spaceship destroys a White House, or when Big Ben is submerged in water.
You may not know what this is, but I'm about to explain. The term mise en scène is a French theatrical expression, which means, roughly, to put into a scene. So this encompasses everything in the scene, such as the costumes, the makeup, and where the actors are actually standing in the scene. So we are going to talk about the four types of mise en scene. This can be setting, lighting, costume, and staging. The setting of any film is important. In disaster films, it usually takes place in a city. This is so they can park in as much action and destruction as they can. An example of this could be The Day After Tomorrow. The lighting depends on the time of the day and the type of disaster. If it were a volcano, it would be very great because of the ash cloud, but also has red for the fires the lava creates. But if you have an earthquake, it does depend on the type of day depending on whether it is day or night. The costumes for disaster films are usually clothes of the day, but they are burned, torn or covered in blood/grime. The staging is very important. It is used to draw attention toward a particular character or object. In disaster films, the director may want to draw attention to the disaster. An example could be a volcano. We are now going to briefly glaze over the disaster films starting in the 1950s. This was the decade of the Cold War and the nuclear annihilation. Films from this era include The War of the Worlds, Godzilla, The Day the World Ended, and On the Beach. This era of the disaster films was influenced by real-life events, such as the assassination of JFK and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Some films from this era are The Birds, The Day, The Earth Caught Fire, and The Planet of the Apes. This was a big comeback for disaster films. They were big-budget disaster films with all-star casts. It included films such as Airport, The Poseidon Adventure, and Meteor. Next came the 1980s. This was a dip in the franchise as only a few films were notable, such as The Day After, The Quiet Earth, and The Dead Zone. Finally, from the 1990s to now, this has seen the revival of disaster films due to new special effects. This includes films such as The Hunt for Red October, Waterworld, Contagion, and 28 Weeks Later. We all know that disaster films have huge budgets, but how big actually are they? We are going to talk about the top 5 grossing disaster films. To start our list, we have War of the Worlds. It was directed by Steven Spielberg and starred Tom Cruise. This film had an estimated budget of $132 million and grossed $234 million. At 4, we have Twister. This film starred Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton and was directed by Jan de Bont. It had an estimated budget of $92 million and has grossed $241 million. At 3, we have Gravity. This space film was directed by Alfonso Cuarón and starred actors such as Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. This had an estimated budget of $100 million and then grossed $274 million. Our runner-up is Independence Day. Roland Emmerich directed a film starring Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum. This film's budget was estimated at $75 million and it has since grossed $306 million. Well, the biggest grossing film to date is Titanic. It grossed over $658 million. That is a lot. It had an estimated budget of $200 million, so it also had the biggest budget on this list. Today, we have talked about the disaster films, generic conventions, mise-en-scene, the history of disaster films, and the top grossing of disaster films. Thank you for watching, and see you later.